I'm Paul O'Kelly and I'm the Head of Marketing for Ianrod Eireann. Iarnród Éireann is Ireland's state railway. And although I'm talking about transformation, I should probably stress we're a very, very old organisation. For those of you who use the DART, for example, the bit between Dunleary and Connolly, you'd be surprised to hear, started services in the 1830s, 1834. It is the oldest commuter railway in the world. We weren't always called Ianrod Éireann, but the culture started back then. We have always been part of the state. And when I say we're part of the state, not always the glamorous parts of the state. For example, when everyone was commemorating in 2016 100 years of the Rising, Iarnród Éireann's role in the Rising was to bring the troops from the Curragh. So we were part of the state then. So that was not really something we could do a poster campaign about. So when we talk about transformation in the railway, it's not so much Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk. It's more like Clark Kent slowly taking off glasses and possibly loosening a tie. Okay, this is not going to be dramatic transformational stuff, but it was slightly transformational. And what today is about is marketeers and the commercial function getting a little bit blinded by what they believed was the important part of transformation. So, hold this the right way around. This is us. Each week we run just under 5,000 train services. We have 629 carriages in our fleet. We have 2,200 kilometres in our network. We carry just under 1 million a week. Hopefully this year we'll go through the million barrier. 144 stations, 348,000 kilometres, and that's our workforce, around 3,800. I can't give you an exact number because for the first time in a decade we're actually hiring. Now, one thing that is interesting about that number is if my predecessors were here in like 2003, that number would have been 7,000. So in terms of how much the company has changed in the last 15 to 20 years, it has changed a lot. So in 2012 was the start of our transformation. For those who remember 2012, Ireland was having an interesting time. Now we have very low turnover in the railway of staff. One of my team has been with Ianrod Éireann for 44 years. And she's not unique in that. Most people leave after 40 years, it's when the pension kicks in, but we have a lot of people who stay their entire life with the railway. But one thing the recession allowed us to do is bring in a lot of leaders from other organisations on the cheap, as in that work for railway salaries. And this happened in 2012. We got Jerry Culligan, who some of you will know. Jerry he was with Mars, he was with Aircom, he was at Aviva, and he's a serious change leader in the commercial area. And one of the first things he did is he said, lads, you need a commercial vision, okay? Now, Jerry is many things, but he's not a wordsmith. And this was the commercial vision here, this bit, which we all tattooed to our shoulders, learnt off, and bought into on the commercial side. But we also then looked at the capabilities and broke down the vision. And what we looked at here was around the easy to buy, easy to use. For those of you who've bought tickets in the last 6 months, maybe it's not so stressful. But if you go back 5 years, the website didn't link to ticket vending machines. The rules were over here. You couldn't do this. No, you can't cancel your ticket. No, you can't buy the cheap one on that train. And there was a lot of pain points, and there's a lot of things you couldn't do. So Jerry said, we need to fix this. Underneath the commercial vision, we also need strategic pillars for change. Now, for you guys, the Lucas Aid and stuff like this, all this is very basic stuff. For railways, it's not. We are essentially 50% engineers, 50% train operators, and deliberately rounding to zero everybody else, okay? So when you look at the commercial people, and you look at the marketing people, and you look at the sales people, it's a tiny section of the organisation. The marketing team in Iarnród Éireann is 7 people. The sales team is about 8 people. The customer comms team that looks after social media is 4 people. So we had to take all this and sort of build up our commercial capabilities. The first one was enhance our understanding of our customers. We undertook a segmentation project, which was purely research-based segmentation, but we had no actual transaction data flowing into that. Develop strong revenue management capability. Revenue management is now what railways call yield management. The airlines have been doing it for 30, 40 years. Railways across Europe only started about 10 years ago. Iarnród Éireann started in 2017. Up until then, we could change prices for trains, but literally, lads, it was a spreadsheet, and we'd go, make it $9.99. Did you make more money? I don't know. But we did it because customers then said, oh, look, they're revenue managing. And it was all on the front end. We were changing prices left, right, and centre. Could we tell if it was giving any results? Not at all, but everyone felt good. Like the board were going, like, whoa, we've turned into Ryanair. We hadn't. We were just changing numbers. By the way, how far are we sending this video when we're finished? Third part, provide effective customer relationship management. We didn't really have the systems to market to our customers. We didn't have much. We couldn't mine into our customer information. In some cases, we couldn't even manage complaint cases correctly, in that they'd get lost off the system, or because we're a traditional organization, a customer would write to the chief executive, because they have a right, we're publicly owned. The chief executive would write back to the customer. Perfect, that closes it. So the problem is that same customer would also write to customer care the same letter. 2 answers within the space of days, saying 2 completely different things. Then they'd write to Barry Kenny, because he's the fella on Joe Duffy. 3rd answer, and we had no clue what was going on half the time. 4th one, drive ancillary revenues. This, now we're still very early in our journey here, but transport operators in general make a lot of money from ancillary revenues, unless you're Ianrod Eireann. We run catering at a loss. Car parks just about wash their face. The only profitable area for ancillary revenues for us is the onboard advertising, the little posters you see on the trains and in the stations. And then the final strategic pillar was something, bear in mind, this is 2012. If you're working in the public sector in 2012, it was just a war, right? Everyone was just fighting for relevance. Hospitals were going to be closed, you know. And Leo Varadkar, then Minister for Transport, and wonderful Taoiseach, just based on the video again, was talking about the relevance of having an intercity railway. Okay? Now, it's hugely changed now, but when you cast your mind back, what he was saying is, why would we have an intercity railway when it carries less people than something like a Lewis? Now, we were pointing, look, you can't compare a Killarney to Dublin to a Houston to Connolly. It's a very different thing. But that was the climate we're in. And we were fighting our corner constantly. And then we said, you know what, lads? Take the higher ground. Just promote public transport. Try and expand the pie and get people talking about public transport as a good thing, rather than saying, why you need to be around, nobody cares about 1834 and all that sort of good stuff. But public transport is in general a good thing. So the start of the Customer First programme was when we realised the commercial vision needed IT system support. Now this was again something very unusual. We'd already started a separate tender process for 2 parts of the system, centralised pricing and new e-commerce capabilities. We actually handed the government money back. We collapsed the process and everyone was like, what are you doing? And we had 5 million ring-fence capital funding from the government in 2012 and we said, we don't want it. It's not the right thing to do. And literally, like the conversation with the NTA and the DOT was like, why do you not want the capital? You realise, like, there wasn't a road built in 2012. There wasn't a single, like, this was essentially a large part of our capital funding. We said, nope, we don't want it. What we're going to do is going to think it all up again and go back out. And we did a market consultation process. What a market consultation process is, where you spend 6 months just talking to people. How would you do it? And we also made a fundamental decision that was very different for the railway back then as well. If you go back 40 or 50 years, we used to make our own trains, right? You'll see them around the place, well, not moving anymore, but like, and this was made in Inchicore, and the big guys that hit the hammers and boom, and we're very proud of it. We kept that culture in IT up until literally 10 years ago. We were making our own IT systems. Sure, you'd buy one that you'd recognise, then you'd customise the bejesus out of it, so nobody else could support it. And I had guys working on systems where Frank Gray, one of our IT guys, would retire, and they go, the manifest didn't load onto the train. Why not? And the manifest, sorry, is the bit that makes the names appear above the seats. Frank used to do something. What used Frank do? Nobody knows. You know? And that was the majority of our IT systems. Or someone would shut down a PC in the corner of an office, and something else miles away would just stop working. And you go, well, why is that? Well, we need to run a little app, and there's middleware, and that was our culture in IT. We'd get it working, and then we'd just walk away. So instead we said, look, we're going for something off the shelf. It doesn't have to do everything we needed to do, because that's what we used to love to do as well. We'd write millions of requirements. It has to do this, that, and the other. And it would all be specialised for just the Irish network. And then we realised, guess what, lads? The old Germans are good at the old railways. They have a system. The French, pretty good. Japanese, pretty good. If they don't bother with little things that we've created, we probably don't need to bother either. We're over customizing. So on we went. So, Customer First programme was established, and we began to beat the organisation with a large stick. This was not going to be an IT project. IT got a bit annoyed about that. We said, look, it's not an IT project. But then they actually got a bit happy because they spent most of their time saying, tell us what you want. And we said, well, actually, what we want is to buy the IT off those guys and not talk to you at all. Right? So it was not an IT project, it was a business transformation project. And because of that, you had to actually begin to look at your own processes. You didn't look at what your expected outcomes or things like that. You looked at what you're doing today and you began to question, well, why are you doing it that way? And then you went back to, well, what would you like to happen? And you saw the gap. And you did not create a software solution for the way you're doing it today. You looked at the outcomes and then you talked to the Germans or the French and they said, well, how do you do all this? It was a long-term commitment, long-term impacts, and we're laying down a legacy. I smile at this bit because some of the booking office hardware we're replacing at the moment as part of this program is called the Cruise system. The Cruise system is 45 years old. It was deployed in Ianrod Éireann in the mid-80s. We bought it at its end of life. The last programmer who ever worked in the Cruise system retired from GE 10 years ago. So there's nobody in the world left working professionally who worked on this system. It's still ticking away. It's perfect legacy where it just sits there. But every year, we load our fares increase into it. And every year, we just sit back. If it falls over, there is a guy called Joe Duffy that we can ring, not the Liveline guy, a guy in our place, and he might be able to bring the box back. But that's pretty much the limit of what we can do it. And that's our booking office system. So when I say we're laying down a legacy, the stuff we're deploying now, we sign contracts for 7 years, but nobody's going to come in 7 years' time and completely rewrite it. So we will be living with this for a long time. We need to be up for it in an organisation, and it's about change. And railway people do not like change. 1834. So what was different about this project is generally the way we would do projects in our organisation is each head of a function would get a call. Well, there's two ways. You get a call and say, need something for a project full time. And you sort of look around the office and go, okay, that guy. And that guy would be gone, and 2 years' time, you'd be giving that guy back, and whether it worked or not, you didn't really care. And then the other way is someone in your office sits one day a month in a project meeting, and the day before, well, actually on the way to the project meeting, everyone reads the minutes and goes, what actions did I have? Oh, that's grand, I'll pretend that's done. And those projects go on for years and years and years and never finish. Whereas in this, Jerry Culligan took head of functions out of the functions. I left the role as head of marketing for 2 years. The head of IT support was taken out. One of the HR managers was taken out. The assistant station manager for Houston was taken out of his job. And we're all sent to a glamorous location, which we call Customer First Towers, but was actually a porta cabin in the back of the Houston car park. And we said, right, you live here now for 2 years, right? Your only job for the next 2 years, I don't care that you think you're the head of marketing, that's no longer your job. You can have it back if you finish this, but this is your job now. And we were co-located with the consortium that were delivering the project. So Cubic set up their first ever office in Ireland in our porta cabin. Cubic is it's a global transportation player. They're probably most famous for doing the aircraft simulator in Top Gun. But they also do ticketing systems for London Underground, and they did the Oyster scheme, for example. So they're fairly good fellas. Skills were a Dutch startup who essentially built everything you need to sell train tickets, bundled into different modules, so you could literally buy it off the shelf. And they, up until us, they had only smaller players as customers, but they'd cracked WeBus, which is a spin-off of SNCF, which is a small private bus company. Rail Solutions, which is the consulting wing of SNCF, which is the National Railway. Storm, which is a Dublin-based company who are a Microsoft house, and Marketo, which a lot of the marketeers in the room will know. It's the world-class marketing software. So, what would we actually deliver? And this is the very cold functionality: CRM, case management, B2B account management, campaign tool, financial data warehouse, online, better capabilities, more accounts. The booking office, I have to warn you, by the way, the booking office machinery in railway language, we develop our own language, is called the booking office machine, which is in what we call internally the BOM. And so discussing the BOM led to a very difficult moment in Schiphol Airport while we were in the security queue, 5 of us having a heated debate about the future deployment of the BOM. And we're asked to really explain what we're doing. And then the portable device is the PD. It's essentially, at the moment, our ticketing, onboard ticketing system is the same as the booking office ticketing system with a strap. So it's a machine this size, and and our guys walk around with this thing that weighs a metric ton, whereas the new PD is an Android device. This was the project plan. It was fairly aggressive. And inception, design config, integration, testing, very painful, but very worthwhile. And then first half deployment was in Q2 2017, and then the second half was towards the end of last year, we went into pilot for the hardware. Railways like to pilot hardware for a long time, so the rest of the deployment will be finished in this year. So what transformed? Some things were quite radical. For the first time in my working life, I could see financial results the next day. So we changed the Rosslare fare to $9.99. Not only could you actually change it there and then and push it out to the website and multiple channels, the next day in Power BI, boom, there's all your web results. 24 hours later, your ticket vending machine results landed in. 72 hours later, your booking office machine would land in. But you began to see immediate cause and effect. Now that is transformative, because we used to have, well, we still do have a Friday meeting, but at the Friday meeting, we'd be talking about 10-day-old results previously. Whereas now, you can have a peek in earlier in the week if you want to. And also, all the reports are interactive, so I can show you on the iPad later on if you want to see, oh, you want to see just cork route? Well, actually, I can't really show you, but I could show you the functionality. There's cork route, there's Gawler route, we can change them, we can slice and dice them, which weeks. That immediately changed the culture, because we were dealing before with spreadsheets, and spreadsheets that one person had on their machine. And that one person goes on annual leave, nobody else has the spreadsheets. And I was talking to the head of finance, and I was like, well, why don't we all have the spreadsheets? Well, that spreadsheet is a combination of 3 other spreadsheets, and then it's a bit like baking a cake, he said. You add a little bit, you take a bit out, you change, and you're like, really? We're a company with $250 million in revenue, and we're changing lines in spreadsheets to explain, well, the Pope's visit happened last year, and there was snow, and I says, yeah. Whereas now, Power BI, it's all there, the unvarnished truth, and it's all linked into SAP. On customer service, Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics now, if you book on the web, that flows into Microsoft Dynamics, which is beautiful, because then when you ring us and say, I was on the 7 o'clock train and there was no catering, we already have your transaction in there, and we can refund it in one go, and it's beautiful. And then we can also go, actually, Paul, you also travelled with us last week and you had a problem. Not only are we going to refund it, here's a €10 voucher, and hopefully we won't upset you next week. Now, that's not a guarantee if you ring up and complain to us, that's what we'll say, but we have the capabilities. Major incident refunding. In the railway, we have a major incident probably about once every 4 weeks. Now, what a major incident is everything just stops, right? Signalling goes in Limerick Junction. So the 7 o'clock train is blocked, the 8 o'clock train is blocked, the 9 o'clock train is blocked. Going the other direction, it's blocked. In the good old days, what used to happen is refund form would come in, person would look at refund form, validate the times, click the ticket, Now, in real time, Ronan in the customer care team, if he decides to do it in real time, he can actually go 7 o'clock, all web customers, automatic 50% back, or automatic 100% back. Bang. And it generates the email saying you've been refunded. Now, we're taking our time in deploying that, but for example, when we had the snow last year, and we knew we weren't going to operate for 4 days, that was tidied up within the 4 days. Whereas when the fellow with the big hat, Garth Brooks, when he didn't come, we were mopping that up for about 3 months. Because customers booked, then they'd say we're not going to travel, and we said anyone who didn't want to travel, we would refund, but obviously they needed to contact us. And we were spending months, like it almost became a country and western song for us, where we couldn't, with one click, undo all this, because all the customer transactions were sitting over here, Dynamics was sitting over here, the data was sitting over there, the credit card system was over there, whereas now it's all integrated. Equally, we have 2 or 3 different types of trains. We have ICRs and Mark IVs, right? You don't need to know this. They look very, very different. They have different seating plans. So if you book on a Mark IV, because you're going to Cork, and then one of our engineers suddenly red flags a train, and that's going to be an ICR, which is a different seating consist. That used to cause an absolute nightmare. Customer care, if they got enough notice, would go in and they'd change Paul's seat from this train. They cancel that, refund, rebook, boom, one at a time, move them all over. Whereas now you can go, that train now looks like this. Please reseat everybody, send them an email. So immediately that can happen, and we can actually begin to plan these things. Because unfortunately, you do get situations with engineering works plans changing or fleet change, so that happens quite a lot. And then the last thing customer care got is, now I've said single view of the customer, kinda, all right? This is where your human comes in. and screws with all your great big plans. Because if I'm paul.o'kelly@irishrail.ie, and I am, and I do a booking and it flows into the system and I do 10 bookings, I'm there, right? Customer care can still raise a case and go, paul.o'kelly@irishrail.ie is complaining. Yes, I see he has 10 bookings, but you know what? I'm going to create a different contact over here and call him a completely different person. So it is theoretically possible to combine it all, but our own guys can, if they want, just mess with the system, and occasionally they do. In revenue management, we got a full suite of tools. It's very technical, it's very scientific. I don't really understand it, but we're making more money is the shortcut there. And in the marketing capability, the Marketo system takes a full feed from the dynamic system, which is taking a full feed from the booking system. So we can now, we have the capability at least, that if you've given us marketing opt-in and you travel on a specific train, we can send you an email about a special offer we may have on that specific train. Or as we're doing at the moment, we're sending people reminders that you can book your parking for Atcoa in advance through the app or on the web. Or as we'll soon be doing, did you want to pre-buy a breakfast and all that sort of good stuff. The customer-facing side, we haven't actually deployed all the capabilities. They're all sitting there. But the ones you'll notice immediately is the fares families. You now can choose the cheapy ticket or the medium or the full flexi, and that's been hugely successful with our customers, because what we used to do is we'd make a train like $9.99 and then say, that's the cheap ticket, you can't change it. I say, well, I'll buy the expensive one then. He says, well, no, we can't sell both, you're buying the cheap one. Whereas now the customer gets to decide. This is very common across airlines for years. What's amazing is pure consumer psychology. Everyone buys the middle one, and the middle one allows you to change if you pay a 20% transaction fee. And also, we've done something that other railways haven't done, which our French consultants were very surprised by. If you buy the semi-flexible, you can travel on a train either side of the train you're booked on without any fee. And customers love that because they're going like, I'm actually paying for that service now. Our ops guys hate it because they can never figure out which trains are actually really going to be busy, because everyone books the 5 o'clock and then they travel on the 4 or the 6. Better website experience and an ability for the customer to amend and cancel. Some of the capabilities we haven't deployed yet, we could go full barcode in the morning with the slight problem that none of the gates read barcodes. So that's a completely different project that's happening. Now the PD that I mentioned earlier does read barcodes, but you can imagine if you're going through Connolly or Houston and none of the gates were opening, it would cause a bit of a problem. Did it work? That's the week we deployed. This is digital revenue. And ever since. That, by the way, is the snow. Before anyone points out we had a dip, we were closed for 4 days. So it did work. Prior to deploying, a couple of times a year we would have €1 million a week in revenue on the web, and we'd all get very excited about that. €1 million, so it was about a 33 million base out of back then it was about 200 million overall. We have every week this year has been €1 million a week on the web. So our customers just said, yeah, that's great, we'll transform. Half our intercity routes are now predominantly online. So the laggards are routes like Rosslare and Sligo. The student population, which weren't booking online, are now 70% online. So it's transformed the customer experience. If you're traveling across the intercity network, it really is a digital-first experience now. So what else improved? Every digital metric improved. Conversion, abandonment, satisfaction. We drove online adoption across every customer segment, even bizarrely enough the free travel segment, because they now book seats, because you can book just a seat reservation only for €2.50 or €5, depending on the journey. And channel cannibalization, because this was one of the first things we had to prove, was offset, because we're beyond the days of having to buy digital channels, as in you don't need to make the web cheaper anymore. You can offer a cheaper product like the Low, but you shouldn't have to buy channel share anymore significantly. So we did have a little bit of channel cannibalization that was significantly offset by overall growth. The business case was delivered, and what was more important for me coming in as the marketing guy, because I knew we would deliver the revenue side with the revenue management tools, we wanted to remove customer pain points, the ability of not being able to change and modify things that customers every day you'd see correspondence coming in across your desk, and it'd be the same 5 or 6 things. Why can't we? Why can't we? Why can't we? So you get back into your job. We deployed in April 2017. I stayed with the program for the following 6 weeks. The hardware side, I turned to the commercial director and said, look, I'm not really going to have much input in deploying the hardware. I want to go back to marketing. He said, okay, fair enough, you can go. But why, we're all celebrating for a while, going, look at all this revenue, what do we do? But then we began to go, so what? For those of you, and I know there's a few in the room, who are veterans of the first dot-com wars of the late 90s and 2000, around then, if you didn't know what to say in a meeting as a marketeer or business person, you'd say something like, we need a world-class look and feel. And everyone just said it, we want a world-class look and feel. Nobody actually explained, first of all, how you can feel a website, but what they meant by that. But I can tell you now, it's no longer a differentiator to have digital tools. Software as a service, the guys next door are all talking about it. It means your competitors will be buying the same system as you in 2 weeks' time with a 6 weeks to deployment. It actually doesn't give you any long-term competitive advantage unless you're Facebook, Google, Amazon. I'll admit they're slightly ahead of the curve, but if you're a railway, it's not going to be a differentiator. We forgot the human element. We drank the Kool-Aid or the Lucozade. We went, digital tools, cancel, amend. That's what customers want. Look at all these complaints I'm getting about it. This is where we went. However, customers want both self-service and be able to talk to a person or meet a person on a train or meet a staff member. And railways are about people. There's a famous quote, which I desperately tried to find the source of for this conference, is that railways are 98% people and 2% steel. I don't know who said it. It was someone very wise. I hope I didn't just make it up. But over the last couple of years and through digitalization programs, we've removed the apparent need for people on the front line. And you can see that as you move around our network. And you saw that in the number at the start. There is less people in the railway. There's less staff on board. Some stations will be unmanned constantly around the clock. And most trains now are what's known as driver-only operated, because we didn't need to put someone on board the train, so only the train driver would be on it. We forgot what we were trying to do. When we're looking at this vision, we focused very much on easy to buy, easy to use. Digital tools, no problem. And value for money, preferred option. Safety and reliability. Train would still be reliable, but customers began to feel less safe. And we're seeing it now. For those of you, like you all have jobs, so I'm assuming you're not listening to Joe Duffy in the afternoon because you work for a living. But there's been a number of conversations about antisocial behaviour on public transport. Now, the media coverage far indexes the actual occurrences. Now, I can't really complain about that because the media coverage for us finding dogs also far indexes the coverage. So, you know, but it has begun to hit the metrics. We've seen a slight dip, not a huge dip. And to be fair, we did this. Like, what role is there for people within the railway? Ticketing is done by the web or the ticket vending machine. Like, to a huge degree, 7% of tickets on the Dart are bought from a person. 7%, you know? The checking is done by a gate. You go through, beep, it opens or reads it, smart card. The PA is automated. You're on the train. If it works, it will tell you what the next station is. It's only when there's an issue, the driver will make a PA announcement. Catering is outsourced. Those nice people pushing the trolley, they're not actually railway people. They're there to provide a catering service, and there's quite clear lines of what they will and won't do. Twitter, and I use that as a handle for all social media, is centralized. We have an award-winning Twitter team. They've won the Sockies 5 out of the last 6 years for best business account. They are brilliant at what they do, right? But if you're on board a train and you are just talking to the Twitter team, you still feel quite lonely. You'd prefer there to be a person. But there was no longer a clear business case. However, roll it back. We are actually a service. So that is your business case in a nutshell. Service is about people. Like, we all use the big iPad thing in McDonald's to order the cheeseburger. You still collect it from a person. Smile, nod, and off you go. So we've made a decision. Every intercity train should have customer-facing staff. And the deployment of that has begun in Q1 of this year. It will take a long time to complete. We're essentially trying to resource, as we always do, from inside. And there's a double-edged sword here. In the media, they're saying, you know, go on to train, huge level of, you know, antisocial behaviour. And we're trying to tell people who work in a station environment that's where they should work, and we can't really compel them. So it will take a while to complete. But the role is 100% customer service. The idea is when you're travelling on a train in Ireland, on intercity, you should see an Iarnród Éireann staff member. And that for us has been the logical conclusion of the digital transformation, that all the tools in the world actually brought us back to a place where we probably should have started, is that our customers want to see our people to deal with the issues. So that's me. Any questions?